This segment of Labatt Buffalo Main Event is brought to you by
O Restaurant and Lounge, 3047 Sheridan Drive in Amherst. It's not just a place to eat, it's something to do.
Welcome back to the Labatt Buffalo Main Event. Bob Gaughan along with Brad Ryder. It is now time for the O Restaurant and Lounge email segments. We answer your questions from our website. Go to buffalomainevent.com, and if we use your email, we'll give you a $25 gift certificate courtesy of O Restaurant and Lounge. Our first email comes from Bill. Bill says that the Bills are at the bottom of the league statistically, offensively, and defensively, but still in the playoff hunt. Brad, do stats matter?
Points scored, points allowed, wins and losses. That's it. I don't want to hear about time of possession. Here's the thing with stats. Have you ever noticed that really the whole point of all of it is have the ball more? They say the big stat is takeaways versus giveaways. That means have the ball more. That's all it means. That's all you ever want. Time of possession. That just means have the ball more.
Right.
The more you have the ball, the more likely you are to win. That's the only stat that matters.
But how do you have the ball? The way you have the ball.
You might find it.
No,
you might find it. They might kick it off to you after they score.
Come on.
Anything can happen.
Come on.
Nothing matters but score.
Yes. What matters is, and how do you score? The way you score is to have offensive yardage and to stop the person defensively.
Right.
So eventually,
isn't this the stupidest conversation we've ever had?
But eventually, it is going to matter. I think eventually that you're going to come up against a team. The New England Patriots, the Indianapolis Colts, more times than not, I believe, have more yardage than their opponent. They stop their opponent more. So I think when you play the best teams in the league, it does catch up with you. And I think also when you look like from year to year, who's that team that went 6-10 that might go 10-6? I think you look for a team that maybe had a bad turnover ratio but did outgain their opponent. So I think stats really do matter.
I don't need a stat to tell me that they're going to get killed every single time they play the New England Patriots. If you want to tell me it's about time of possession, that's fine. You want to tell me it's about yardage? It's about Tom Brady is going to beat them every single time they play until he retires. It stinks, but that's the fact of the matter. Next email comes from Steve. It says, the Sabres' inconsistency is driving me nuts. Which is the real team? The one that gave up 8 goals to L.A. or the one that scored 7 2 nights later in San Jose?
I think both are the real team.
Here we go. Yeah.
Right. Well, they're at this point, they're a 500 team. Mm-hmm. And what do 500 teams
Sometimes
do?
They win and sometimes they lose. About roughly half.
Right. Well, on the road, what happens? They go on the West Coast and they lose 2 out of 3 on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. They come home, they win 2 out of 3. I mean, that's pretty much what the Buffalo Sabres are, and that's what, unfortunately, what they've been all year. And that's why I think at this particular point, nothing's going to prove to me that they're not going to be fighting for just the 8th playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. They have to go on a serious run. I think the one concerning part of that West Coast trip was the lack of grit in some of those games, the lack of toughness, which was a problem last year, and I think is going to continue to be a problem against certain teams, particularly the Western Conference teams.
But is this team ever going to be able to change that about itself? I mean, they're so far removed from being an Anaheim type of team. We're talking about replacing 5 or 6 players with 5 or 6 completely different style players, if that's the way that you decide you want to play. I think the Sabres are still trying to get things done with speed, and we've been talking about this quite a bit, that some of that's being taken away from them. We'll talk to Larry Quinn about that coming up. But if they're going to have success, I still think the formula is going to be about speed and finesse.
Unless the NHL changes the rules, right? And becomes more like the NFL, which it is right now, right? With all the clutching and grabbing and hitting. And if it goes back to a more open style, this team is one that obviously is more conducive. But without it, I think they're going to struggle. And I think that's a question, what is the NHL going to do? And we'll ask Larry Quinn about that coming up next. It is the managing partner of the Buffalo Sabres, Larry Quinn, on Labatt Buffalo Main Event.
Whenever I get an opportunity to speak to a group of seniors, the first thing that I like to talk about is planning ahead. Whenever we have a conversation, I hear things like, well, I want to stay in my home forever, and that is wonderful. It's a great plan, it's a nice vision to have, and it's quite frankly probably possible. But there's always the possibility that it may not be. If you don't take an active role in planning now, you may not have the opportunity to participate when the time comes.
Bristol Home and Bristol Village, assisted living where family matters.